because these were high credit rating instruments with high credit rating, or because they had a shorter term maturity, so anyway maturity risk was low. All right. Then we also noted that because it was low maturity, these are high in liquidity, can be quickly converted into cash. And again, due to this ability is why this market is called money market. Okay, because these instruments are considered close substitutes to money. Then we had discount pricing. Discount pricing, we noted, is something that was that was a specific feature when it comes to the money market instrument. Why? The instrument will bear a face value, which means if you the instrument will have a value per se. Think of it, say 100 rupees, but when they issue it, when you purchase the instrument, a fresh instrument, you don't buy it at the face value, you buy it at a price lesser than that. So instrument may be 100 rupees, but you buy it at 90. So on maturity, you get 100. So the difference is what you call the discount. So you have a 10 rupee of a discount, a 10% discount. All right. So that's what. So some money market instruments bear this technique of pricing. That was some particular feature that was specific to a money market instrument. And then after that, we went through the roles and significance of money market. And I tested this with our last week test questions as well. The one I sent out through email. Many of them had answered very well, true. But again, when I put out a question in the test question, I don't want you to copy paste the same answer. I want you to understand, write it in your own words, because every keyword is important when you write it. Okay, so when it comes to this, you can't say just policy. When you come to the first point, you have to say it effectively performs a role in discharging monetary policy. Okay, so there are keywords that you need to emphasize on, and that's what we are developing with our weekly test question bank. So even if you haven't sent me an email, I want you all to drop me your email address to mine. You will only get the email, you will only get the test question bank if you can actually drop an email to mine, because I'm unable to extract the email from the chat. So drop me an email. I've shared my email address. Drop me an email, and I will send out the last 2 weeks question banks. Do it. So this is the now I will send out the last 2 week one only for the ones who didn't get it. If you didn't send me the answer by the next week for all 3 papers, I'm not going to keep sharing the past papers. Okay, so we'll try to keep it a weekly basis so we don't have any arrears being carried forward. Okay, so then we went through the significant and the purpose of the money markets, and then we specifically went through who were the participants and what was their intention in coming into the money market. Okay, so if the government is coming in, what was their role, what was their intention of getting into the market? The central bank, the primary dealers, the other financial intermediaries, and the companies. Now companies can also come as a lender and also as a borrower, and then we saw their intentions there. And then as an ultimate lender, what are you looking for in a money market? And then we moved on to money market instruments. What are the instruments being traded in money markets? Then we have 7 there. We had treasury bills, commercial papers, repurchase agreement, certificates of deposits, interbank, loans and deposits, euro currency instruments. That is another new one. It's a new addition to money market instruments. And then we have bankers acceptance. It's quite rare in Sri Lanka, but internationally, yes. And then what did we do? We classified these 7 into the ways of calculating their return. So we saw that some instruments were actually on discount pricing. They had a face value. Though they have a face value, it's issued to the market at a lesser value than the face value, and then you earn a discount. So what were those instruments? We had treasury bills, commercial papers, and even bankers acceptance being traded on discount. And then on add-on basis, what did I mean by add-on? Now, if you on a usual basis, you have a principal and an interest component added on. It's not discount pricing. It's normal simple interest method. Okay. So there, if you want, you can say it's on a simple interest basis that add-on rates work. So what are those instruments? We have normal commercial bank loans and deposits. Then we had certificate of deposits, and then even repos and reverse repos. I remember I wanted you all to put an asterisk on the certificate of deposit because it actually involves both the techniques. I will explain it to you once we get to the topic, why they use both add-on and discount in their trading process, but put an asterisk there. Okay, so here what I mean by add-on rates is initially when certificate of deposits is issued, it follows a add-on rate basis. Okay, and then we move to the very main money market instrument. That was a treasury bill. Who is the issuer of a treasury bill? The government. But the government issues it through the central bank. You all should know the specific department which handles treasury bills and bonds. That's the public debt department of central bank. And what are the maturities that they issue at? 91, 182, and 364. Okay. And then I also emphasized another thing. All these instruments have a ISIN number, if you can recall. This number, ISIN. I'll try to zoom it. Hope you all can see. ISIN number. I want you all to take a note of it. What is ISIN mean? It's International Securities Identification Number. Okay. Each security has this specific number assigned to that, and we understood how you can interpret this number. That also I want you all to take a note of it, because that can be used in a calculation. They can give you a ISIN number because that has the maturity dates, that has the information whether it's a treasury bill or bond, and then they can only give another additional information and ask you to calculate the discount, ask you to calculate the yield. So you need to understand what kind of information that you can get from the ISIN number. So this is the ISIN number. You can see the three maturities, 91 days, 182 and 364. So I told you the first two refers to the country. If you can just make a note of it. First two refers to the country. Okay. And then you have the letter A here. What does A? If it's A, it refers to treasury bills. If it's B, it's treasury bonds. Okay. And then you have the next three digits. The first three digits in the series will tell you the tenor of the instrument. Now here, because it's a 91 day, it's 091. Here it's 182. Here it's 364. So the tenor of the instrument, you can get it from the ISIN number. All right. And then that's the first three. Okay. Then the next three digits, you have two digits there and one letter. Okay. So the first two digits will tell you the last two digits of the year, maturity year. Okay. What is that? The last two digits of the maturity year. So this instrument is definitely maturing in 2020. Again, this one 2020, but this one maturing in 2021. That we can understand it's a 364-day bill. Okay, so this is maturities in 2021. Now, what does this letter refer to? This letter refers to the month in which the maturity happens. So, how does it start? A represents January. So, B represents February. And that's how the series will go till December. So, it will start with A and end with L. So, now here you can see this instrument. Now, this is issued in June, right? So, you can understand now, because we know the date, issue date, now we can interpret whether this code is correct. Ideally, I would refer to September. Okay, so you know, because you're issuing it in June, it's July, August, September. So exactly 3 months. And then you have this 20L refers to 2020 December. L refers to December. So there you can see it's a 6-month treasury bill. We are issuing it in June. So July, you can do the calculation. So it will definitely mature in December. But here it's 2021 F. F refers to June. So not this. Now you're issuing it in this June. It will mature next year June. Okay. So these three, these are the ones that you can actually get the information from. The last 3 digit refers to a serial number, the series of issues. Okay. So that you don't actually, if you really know, if you're in the back office of a treasury, yes, you can use that to know the coding, but for the calculation per se, you don't need that. Okay. Make a note of it. Again, I will make sure to include a model question for this week's paper based on this series. So make a note of that. Okay. So then we saw treasury bills is considered as one of the safest instrument. Why? Because of the issuer. The issuer is the government. But remember, it's only considered safe if the government issues it in their own domestic currency. It can be Sri Lanka, it can be any country. As long as the government issues the security in their own currency, you can consider that as the safest of all instruments. Because why? The government will have the authority to print their own money. So they at any time they can repay, even by printing, the worst case scenario. But if they issue us instrument which is denominated in foreign currency, for example, think it's a dollar denominated instrument, the government can only repay through refinancing. So if they are unable to refinance, you can't repay. So there again, if the treasury bill is denominated in a foreign currency, you cannot say it's risk-free, you cannot say it's default risk-free especially. Okay, so make a note of that. You have to remember that very carefully. Okay, and then we understood treasury bill market. Treasury bill market, I'm not referring to money market. The treasury bill market where treasury bills get traded and issued, has both primary and secondary. So remember, for this instrument, it has both primary and secondary markets. Okay. In primary market, who intervenes? It's the central bank and the primary dealer at the initial auction. And then at the secondary market, you have the primary dealers selling the treasury bills to investors. Okay. So this, make a note of it, because I think it has appeared in some of your MCQs as well. They list down the instruments and ask you what instrument has a secondary market, what instrument doesn't have a secondary market. So probable MCQ questions. And then also we noted that what you refer to, if they tell you the term on the run issue, what does it refer to? Trying to scroll it. Oh, sorry. So if they use this word called on the run issue, what does it mean? It's the most active, recently issued treasury bill that is being traded in the market. Okay, that means it's now thinking. Now, what you say as on the run issue for this week is what got issued last week. Okay, the very recent auction, what was released, that's the most traded one. You call that on the run issues. So what's the opposite of it? If they use off the run issues, those are the treasury bills that was issued at an earlier auction or an older auction that is being traded now. Okay. Know those, if you can just make a note of it. On the run issues was the common term that's used. There is also another one which says off the run issues. So that's the opposite of it. On the run means recently reissued securities. Off the run refers to the older issued securities. Okay. And then we moved on to the formulas. Why I'm going through these in detail is it's important. I understand that it might not come in a section 2 question, but definitely you will have MCQs out of it, or even in a section 2 where they talk about a bond, but they might link it to a treasury bill. So have a good understanding of it, of these areas. Okay. And when it comes to treasury bills, how are we going to do the calculations? Remember, treasury bills don't have a coupon. It's called zero coupon instrument. How do we get the return out of treasury bills? It's through discounting. Okay, so these are considered discount instruments. Okay, so they don't have an interest payment paid monthly. So we saw that there is a 3-month tenor. So that doesn't mean every month you get an interest. At the end of maturity, you get paid the face value. So the one that you bought for and what you get at the end is the face value. That difference is your discount. Okay, so that's what's happened in a treasury bill. So what does discount, when you have to calculate for discount, do any calculations, remember it's face value minus the purchase price. Okay. So if they say discount rate and denominate it as a percentage. Okay, now here discount refers to the amount in rupees. How do you find it in rupees? Get the rupee value of the face value, then you get the purchase price in rupees, subtract it, you get the discount. But discount rate, which is denoted as a percentage, remember you have to express it as a percentage of the face value. So you have discount, what you calculated from before, and then you divide it by the face value. I asked you to highlight this because it's important. Okay, let me see. Okay, so it's still of face value. I wanted you all to highlight that. Why? Remember always discount rate. When we are talking about discount rate, it's in relation to the face value. Okay, so based on the face value, how much of a discount are they issuing it at? So discount divided by face value, and then you have to annualize it. Okay, how do you annualize it? You divide it, you multiply it by 360, and I want you to highlight 360 here, divided by the days to maturity. How many days left till the treasury bill is to be matured? Okay, again I will explain why I asked you all to highlight these when we move on to the yield part of it. And then again there's another component, another way of calculating, that is called holding period yield, another element of return calculation for treasury bill. So holding period yield is unannualized rate of return. The key word here is it's not annualized. So in this particular calculations, you don't have any days to be included in the formula. Remember that. Okay, so holding period is very straightforward. You have the discount and then you match it with the purchase price. Here you don't have any face, you don't divide it by the face value. You only use the face value to arrive at the discount. Okay, so how do you calculate this holding period yield? You will have the discount divided by the purchase price. Remember, when you talk about yield or return, you always talk about the amount that you invest and the return that you get. Okay, so amount that you invest is the price that you paid to get the treasury bill. Okay, that's your investment. So that's why when they say yield, we are using the purchase price, not the face value. Okay, make a note of that. So here you can see there is no day calculations. You don't have to convert it, multiply it into 360 and divide it by days to maturity. No, nothing like that. Why? It's unannualized rate of return. It's just a return that you want to see by just holding this asset. How much am I getting on a just gross basis? Okay. Then you move on to a much more important way method component of calculating the return, which is called the annual yield, or it's called the investor's rate, required rate of return. Okay, so now here what do? You need to understand that yield, as I told you before, depends on the, especially on the purchase price. Okay, because that's your investment. Okay, and why does face value comes in? Because face value will determine your discount. But unlike your holding period yield, unlike this component here, remember yield is annual yield. So you have to definitely have a day component to it. Okay, you're going to annualize it for a year. But what you need to know is when you have yield calculation, you need to use 365 days, because internationally yield calculation always involves a 365-day calculation. That's the norm. You spread it across the year, annualizing. Okay, so now there are three ways to find it. What are the three ways? It's the same way, but that's being simplified. Okay, so this is the first detailed formula. You will have your face value minus the purchase price. What do you get? You get the discount. Okay, and then you have the discount minus purchase price. You can see that here. Okay, discount minus discount divided by purchase price into 365 days divided by days to maturity. Now here you can highlight this purchase price and 365. You can see how this formula differs from the discount rate formula. It's pretty much the same. It's just that instead of face value, we are putting purchase price, and instead of 360, we use 365. Easier way for you to remember. Okay? That is how you link the discount rate formula to the yield. Based on that, how we can adjust the yield formula. Another one is, how do you adjust the holding period yield to annual yield? Simple. Now this holding period yield is not annualized. So when you annualize it, you get the annual yield. So what do? You have the holding period yield as a percentage. So simply multiplied by 365 divided by days to maturity should get your answer. Okay. Now remember, these are three ways. So this is one method. Okay. This is one method. This is the second method. And this is the third method. Okay. Three ways of calculating, made easier for you. So basically, remember, for you don't have to memorize these formulas, understand it. How you can convert holding period yield to annual yield, how you can use the discount formula, how do you adjust it so you can remember the annual yield formula. Those are the easy techniques that you can use. Okay. And then we came to a more complicated topic. How do you find the price of a treasury bill? Now, if you're buying a treasury bill at the very issue date, when the issue itself, when you buy, it's known. You know the price that you're going to buy it for. But when it's being traded in the secondary market, how do you calculate the treasury bill price? That's important. Okay. So that's, now here what I did was, I used three different ways here as well to calculate price of a treasury bill. And I've told you, see, if you have these information, you can use this formula. If you can use this information, you can use this formula. And if you can use these annual yield, you can use this particular formula. So you have, based on this, if they give you discount rate only with the face value and days to maturity, the first formula. If they only give you holding period yield, what do you do? If they only give you annual yield, what are you going to do? Okay. So based on the three return components, I have given you three different ways to calculate the pricing. And now you can memorize it if you are expert at memorizing years, but we can do the calculation and understand on what basis is this formulas are being structured. Okay. Now I need you to do a small correction to your note. In this third formula, it says just annual yield. Make sure you put a divided by 100, because here now if you how I've mentioned just annual yield is when you're just using the percentage, it's okay. But you have to, when I say divided by 100, I want you to denote it as a fraction. Okay. So here and here you can see the percentage is being denoted as a fraction. If you say 5% discount rate, you can just put 5% here and do the calculations. Okay, but what I want to do is put 5 divided by 100. It's easier for you to do the calculation. If not, how I know is the certain students get confused at the exam. What they do is when you have to put 5%, they put the decimal version of it and do the calculation, and they arrive at a totally different answer. So always remember, use the fraction type, then it's easier for you. You are more clear. Okay. And then we had the questions. Now we couldn't do the questions in class because of this setup. I can't see whether you're all doing it or not, whether you're in a place to actually do it. So we were just able to go through the questions. That's it. But I feel that it's better if we do the question, so we could actually understand what goes behind it. So we'll try to do one on Excel now. So the very first question what we had was, you buy a 360-day treasury bill at the price of 95, face value of 100. Now when it comes to calculations, what I suggest that you all could do is a technique that I used when I was doing my exams, was that you need to jot down the information in from that question separately. Then it's easier for you. Okay. So now from these questions, you can know, you know the days to maturity. It's 360. You know the price, 95. And you know the face value, 100. So this question actually has given you 3 information. 3 components only. So based on the 3, you're going to find the discount rate, your holding period yield, and the yield. Okay. And how are we going to do that? Let's see, is there any questions? Okay, no, so far. So how do we do this? This is the first question. So we know the face value, it was given. We know the price, and then the days to maturity was 360. So depending on that, we need to first find the discount rate. Okay, when you say rate, it's the percentage. So for you to calculate the percentage, you need to know the amount first. So how do you know the amount? First, face value minus the price. So you have a discount in rupee terms of 5 rupees. Okay. And then how do you convert this into the percentage? Easy. How do you do it? You have the discount as an amount divided by, what you divide it by? Price of face value. Face value, yes. And then what you do it? Do you have to annualize it? Yes. But when you are annualizing, what will you do? Will you 365 or 360? It has to be 360 divided by the days to maturity. Okay. So here, because it's 360 day and the annualizing date is also 360, you will pretty much arrive at the same. So it will be 5%. Okay. 5%. And then we move to the holding period yield. Holding period yield is not annualized, no. So there is no day calculation. Remember that. So how do you find holding period yield? Easy. How do you do it? You get the discount in amount, not the rate. And then you divide it by, is it face value? No, you divide it by face value for the discount rate only. You're going to use price, just price. And then you arrive at your answer. There is no day calculation. So you get 5.26 as your holding period yield. But I need to know the annual yield now. What is my annual yield of actually holding this? So there, what are we going to do? Important. Here, again, we start with the discounting amount divided by price. Why? Because it's yield, you're divided by price, the issue price or the purchase price. Then can you stop it here? No. Why? Because this answer will only get you the holding period yield. Then you have to annualize it. Okay. Now when you annualize it, it's going to be 365 divided by correct. Okay, thank you. Correct, Monica. Thank you. Okay, so you have 365, not 360, and then you divide it by days to maturity. How many days do we have? We have 360. That will get you the the annual yield. Okay, that will get your answer. So you can see it from here. Okay, how do you, if you want, you have time, how do you cross check it? It's easy. If you already have the holding period yield, just a matter of annualizing it. Holding period yield into 365 divided by 360 gets you the answer, and you can see that irrespective, they both should get you the same answer. There is no change in that. Okay, pretty straightforward, very easy. Then we move to the second question. What was the second one? Let's do that as well. Now here days to maturity is changing, and we're going to see how to do the question. Pretty much the same information. The days to maturity becomes 182. So here you have 182 days. I hope you all can see it. Let's zoom it a bit. Okay, so you have 182 days to maturity, pretty much the same information against the same question requirements as well. So again, you can see the discount calculation, discount in rupee terms is the same. So you have the face value minus the price. That's 5 rupees. Yes. Again, discount rate. What is going to be the discount rate here? It's going to be the same? No. What's going to be here? It's going to change. Why? Earlier, we had 360 divided by 360 itself. Now here, days to maturity has changed. Okay. Now remember, this will get you this. First, what you do is you have to divide discount by the face value. That will get you 5%. True. But this 5% is for how many days? Effectively, this 5% is for only 182. So first what you do is, let's do this. So you get discount divided by face value. Okay, so that's like a percentage there itself. Assume that's the discount rate before annualizing. Yes. So that represents how much of a discount as a percentage for the time that you're holding. So 182. So how do you know the 1 day return? 5% divided by 182 will get you the 1 day. When you multiply that into 360, you will get your discount rate for the year. And that's why we annualize it. How does the formula work? We multiply into 360 and divide it by days to maturity. You see the return for 1 day of holding, and then you try to annualize it into 360. Hope you all got it. If not, it's very much very straightforward. If you are doing the formula method, how do you do it? I'll remove this off. So how do you do it? You have 5 rupees. 5 rupees divided by the face value. Remember discount rate. Okay. And then you're going to multiply it by, how much are you going to multiply it by? 365 or 360? 360, okay, divided by days to maturity. So that will get a discount rate of 9.89. Okay. Then you have the holding period yield. Will the holding period yield change? No. Why? Here in this particular question, okay, because the only changing component is days to maturity. Your face value is the same and your price is the same. Therefore, your discount is also same. So discount as a percentage of your price is the same as before. It's 5.26. But again, your annual yield, that will definitely change. Why? The days that you're holding for is changing. Okay. Now here what you're going to do, you will have discount divided by the purchase price. Okay. Multiplied by 365 divided by, now you have days to maturity of only 182. So that will get you a 10.56%. You can also do it by just converting holding period yield multiplied by the day calculation. You will get the same answer. There should be no change in it. It should be the exact same answer. Okay? I hope you all understood that. So with this, what you can learn out of it is, remember, annual yield is always a bit higher than the discount rate. Am I correct? Yes. Why? Again, we know it even mathematically. Even mathematically, we can tell why. Why? Because here face value is higher. Okay, you are dividing it by a higher component. But in a yield, you are dividing it by a lower amount, which is the purchase price. Okay, so always your yield is going to be higher than your discount rate. Now, there can be questions where they will say a treasury bill bearing a discount rate of 6% will definitely have a yield of. So the options will say definitely more than 5%, definitely less than 5%, no information. So you know, even without calculating, you should be able to know the yield is definitely higher than the discount rate. Okay, so those are the ones that you can learn. So make a note of it there. Yield is always higher than discount rate. Why? Because yield is based on the purchase price, which is lower than the face value used in the discount rate calculations. Okay. And then we move to the third question, which is a price calculation. So here you have the purchase price. You have to find the purchase price of a 91-day treasury bill. Now here again, first filter the information that the question gives you. You have the days to maturity 91. You have the face value. Here you also have the discount rate. You have the holding period yield. And you have the annual yield given. Okay, so using the three methods that we have given you, you need to do the calculations. And irrespective of the three methods, you should get the same answer. Just for your experience, for you to remember the formula, I'm asking you to do it. Okay. Now here we can go to it. You have the face value, you have the days to maturity, and then you have the three types of rate calculations with regard to treasury bills. You have the discount rate, you have the holding period yield, and then you have the yield itself. Okay. Now, three options. Okay. So, the very first one is you take face value days to maturity and you match it with the discount rate. And then the second is face value. You don't need days to maturity for that. Use your holding period yield and try to get the price. And then you have your yield calculation. How do you use the yield and days to maturity with the face value to arrive at the answer? Okay. So now first one of the very basic ways to find the purchase price. How do you find the purchase price? Face value minus the discount will definitely get you your purchase price. It will get you a purchase price or it will get you the price at which it got issued. Depends on the discount amount. Okay. So now here they have 100 rupees as the face value. Yes. Okay. and then they have given you a discount rate. This discount rate, what I want you to understand is, this is annualized, correct? If you go to this formula, you can see we annualize it. All right. So first you need to reverse the annualization. You have to reverse the calculation. How do you do it? Now it's 2.9761 for 1 year. Okay. So if it's 1 day, how much is it? So how much will it be? Let's do the calculations. So let's do it here. Okay. Let's do it here. This divided by 360. Remember, 360. So that will get you like a 1 day rate. Okay. Now how much is the days to maturity here? It's 91. Okay. So this 1 day component, you will convert it into 91 days. So pretty much this into 91. Now this is like the discount rate for the 91 days. Okay. So then now what you have done, you have now effectively arrived to this. Earlier the answer here was 2.9. So the moment you reverse this, now you have arrived at this component. How much is this component? 0.75. Okay. So now it's easy. You say discount as a percentage of face value is 0.75. Okay. So if 0.75 is your discount amount, 1 minus 0.75 will get you the purchase price. So what do? You can either use this method. You can either say 0.75% into 100 rupees and find the discount amount. This is your discount amount. Okay. Discount amount. And then you minus the discount amount from the face value to get the purchase price. Or what you can do is 1 minus 0.75, this is mathematical, into 100. Again, that will get you the same answer. See how the formula is being deconstructed. Okay, so it's the same path, same path. What you do here is, you have the discount rate, you have to reverse the calculation. Earlier you multiplied it by 360 divided by days to maturity. Now here what you're going to do is, you're going to do the upside down of it. It's going to be multiplied by days to maturity divided by 360. And I explained you why. Because it's annualized, you need to bring it down to the period itself, to the days to maturity. So the annual amount, you divide it by 360, you get the 1 day component. And when you multiply by days to maturity, you get the rate for the days of actually you're holding the maturity. Okay, that is the percentage. So you can either take that discount percentage, multiply it by the face value and get the discount amount, and then you get the purchase price, or you can simply say 1 minus that particular discount rate into purchase value. Okay. Now here is another basis. Now when it comes to these two basis of calculation, it's a very different mathematical approach that it uses than the option 1. So better you all remember the formula rather than going into detail of calculation, because there you have fractions involved and the addition to actually, it's a reverse calculation for you to get it. So basically remember this. How does it work? You have face value divided by 1 plus holding period yield. That's simple. Okay. So if it's annual yield is where it's going to get a bit complicated, where you have to reverse the annual yield because it's annual, reverse it, and then you add it to +1, and then you divide face value with it. Okay, so pretty much the same formulas that we studied earlier, we are just reversing it. So based on that also, you should get the same answer. Okay, 9.25 and 9.25. Work it out. These are pretty much the easiest. So you know you have the holding period yield, 1 plus holding period yield, and then 100 divided by the 1 plus holding period yield will get you the price. Again, here what I have done is I have deconstructed it for you, because remember, when you have annual yield and you reverse it, what do you get? This entire, let me see. Oops. When you do this bit of the calculation, remember, this will get you your holding period yield. Okay, let's see how it works. Now here you can see I have taken the yield, the annual yield, and I have reversed it. I have multiplied by the days to maturity and divided it by 365. And what has that got me? It has got me the same, it has got me my holding period yield. Okay, and then just like how I used to do with the holding period formula, I will add it to +1. I will add +1 to that, and then I'll use that to divide the face value. Again, I get the same answer. Okay, so we'll do a lot of calculations, especially the MCQ ones is where you will get tested more and understand the formula, so you don't have to actually memorize it. Okay, so with that we are done with treasury bills. Okay, so I want you all to take a few notes of it. You all took a note mentioning that yield is higher than discount rate. Yes, and another one I would have stressed last week for you all to take up is how the price changes or the yield changes when the days to maturity decreases. Okay, so you have a treasury bill, one treasury bill issued at 682. When it changes, how does it vary? When the days to maturities keep decreasing, how does it affect on your return? Returns keep coming down, but you can see the prices increasing. If you take a graph, we know when the maturity, days to maturity is decreasing, price will definitely be moving upwards. This black graph, sorry, black line is what I refer to as the price. Why? It has to slowly move on to the face value. And you can see the inverse relationship between price and yield. Remember, there is an inverse relationship between price and yield. I want to take a note of it. When yield increases, price drops. When yield decreases, price increases. An inverse relationship. Okay? Take a note of that as well. That you can even understand with the formulas. So for you to get a higher yield here, the price here has to decline. Only if the price declines, you can get a high yield. Why? Discount will increase, the denominator will decrease. Okay? So make a note of those two learning. And another one I want you all to stress here is when it comes to your IBSL paper. Okay? When it comes to your IBSL paper, even though that we use 365 here, what I've noted is they use 364. Now, internationally, yield calculation will always use 365. But here, because it's related to treasury bills, and treasury bills always have a maximum tenor of 364, they suggest of using 364 here. Okay, so if you can make a note of it and say, for just make a highlighting point there, right here. Okay, just make a note of it. For the exams or for exam purposes, it's you're going to use 364. Okay, 364 here, and again here also 364. For yield relating to treasury bills, you're going to use 364. And then we move to commercial papers. Commercial papers, we saw that it's issued by non-financial companies. Okay, it's unsecured and it's short-term debt instrument. It's not secured like debentures or any other thing. It's unsecured. It's short-term. You issued by high credit rating companies, and because it's high credit rating companies, you don't actually need any security. You assume they are rated high in terms of their credit worthiness, so therefore you take the risk. But remember, compared to treasury bills, commercial papers are riskier. Because of that, compared to treasury bills, definitely the commercial paper rates or returns are higher. Okay, so like in most cases, commercial papers have a tenor of 90 to 9 months. It's either from 3 months to 9 months is their maturity tenor. Okay, and it's issued by stronger companies who can make use of getting loans without going into a hassle of giving any collateral, and they can ideally get the borrowing at a lower rate compared to going to a bank, and that's why they opt for commercial papers. Now I couldn't see a recent commercial paper issue a public notice of it, but I was able to get an older version where there was a Abans commercial paper issue in 2012. You can see how the Fitch rated it. You can see it's an issue up to 3 months, used to fund companies' working capital requirements. So those are what you actually know theoretically. I'm showing you the practical side of it. So here they have done a rating where they've gone into detail of the company. So on average, 80% of it will be definitely rolled over on maturity. Okay, so they talk about how the payment works and about the creditworthiness of the company, and whether, because it's a credit rating on this commercial paper, so they will also give you actions that will trigger downgrade or upgrade. Actions that will trigger the rating of the issue to go up, improve, or to decrease. So what will trigger a negative, what will trigger a positive are also given here, just so that you can understand how practically it works. Okay. Then what we again now see, this is the note that we had. It's common for issuers to roll over commercial paper. You can see even in this Fitch rates, in the Abans commercial paper issue, you can say you can see that Abans has confirmed on average 80% of its commercial paper will be rolled over on maturity. Okay, so that's something done by the commercial paper issuers, where they borrow for a shorter tenor and again they borrow to settle that, they keep rolling it over. Okay, so what does that allow them to do? That will allow them to borrow for longer periods using short-term rates. Okay, which is significantly lower than long-term rates. In a normal yield curve, we know that yield curve is normally it's positively sloping, so you can see short-term rates are lower and long-term rates are higher. So based on refinancing, they can take the benefit of the lower short-term rates. Okay, but remember, commercial papers don't have secondary market. Now we learned treasury bill has, commercial papers don't. But just like treasury bills, commercial papers are also traded at a discount to their maturity value. So then the same calculations that you studied under treasury bills, you can use here. But remember what I've told you. When you have yield calculation at your exam with regarding to treasury bills, you are going to use 364. But when it's a commercial paper, you will use 365 as usual. Okay. So again, here I have given some questions for you. We'll go through that as well. So here you can first filter the information. You have days to maturity. You have the face value. Then you have the discount rate. Okay. You have the discount rate given. You need to find the price of the commercial paper. So pretty much the first formula what we studied here. Okay. So how do you do that? Let's see. You can understand. So you can pretty much use the formula per se, where you have the face value denoted. You have, first what you do it, you get your discount rate, you reverse it. You multiply it by the days to maturity and divide it by 360. Remember? So again, discount rate, you use 360. So again, even in commercial papers, it's 360. Okay. So discount rate into days to maturity divided by 360. That particular answer you will minus from 1, and then again you will multiply that with the face value to arrive at your price. Now how do I explain this to you? Simple. You know, price is the difference between face value and the discount amount. So you know the face value, that's 110 million. How do you know the discount amount here? You need to find the discount amount here. They've only given you the rate. Okay. Can you just use the discount rate into the face value? No, you can't use that. Now here, that's the calculation I have done. But can you use that? No, that's a year calculation, annual based one. So just multiplying discount rate into face value will get you 475,000. And that's like a discount amount if the days to maturity is 360. So here it's 30. You can't use that. So what you're going to do, this 475, it's a 360 return. So you will divide it by 360, find the 1 day discount amount. So 1 day discount amount is 1,319. So if it's 1 day for 30 days to maturity, how much will the discount be? So 1 day into 30. That will get you 39,583. And then this is the discount amount. Face value minus this particular discount amount will get you the exact same answer. The same purchase price. Okay. This is what happens in this particular question, in this particular formula. So I want you all to understand that. So the next question what we have is you need to find the discount rate. The question would have given you the face value, the days to maturity as 30, and they've already given you the price. So pretty straightforward. What will you have to first know the discounting amount. How much is the discounting amount? 1 million divided by 990,000. So you have 10,000 as the discount amount. So discount rate is this particular discount amount divided by face value, yes. And then you will multiply it. You have to annualize it, remember? You will multiply it by 360 divided by days to maturity. So that will get you 12%. So how do you do it? 10,000 divided by face value, discount divided by face value, and then you multiply it by 360 divided it by days to maturity. Will get you the discount rate of 12%. Okay, same as the treasury bill calculation. Now here it's a new addition. Here what I've used is I have given you all other information, but I'm asking you to find the face value of the instrument. It's a different variation that's untested, but they can actually use. So remember, simple terms, how do you find face value? Price minus the discount will get you the face value. Okay, I have given you the formula here. Again, what you do, you have the discount rate, you reverse it, minus it from 1, divided it by the purchase price, you will get the face value. But we are going to understand why we are doing that. Okay. So face value, you know, is the difference between, is the addition of price and the discount amount. Okay. So it's going to be discount amount. If you add these two, you will get face value. Okay. So now here you have the price already mentioned. They have given you the discount rate. Discount rate for a, remember, discount rate is always for a year. Okay. So now first what I can either do is I can first calculate the 1 day percentage. Discount rate divided by 360 will get me the 1 day percentage. Then I'm going to multiply it by the days to maturity of this instrument, which is 182. Okay. So now I know the discount as a percentage of face value is going to be 1.5%. Okay. Yes. I know that discount as a percentage of face value is going to be 1.5. So that means 1 minus that amount is 98.5, which means purchase price divided by face value is 98.5%. Now I know the price, I know the ratio. So simply reversing it will get me my face value. Okay. Again, let's see. I'll explain in case you all didn't get it. What I have done here is I have the discount rate, which is 1 year. Okay. There are two ways. One I could do is I can first divide it by 360 and get the 1 day percentage. Yes. Now this 1 day percentage, I am going to see for this particular maturity, how much is it. So I will multiply it by the days to maturity, 1.5. Now this 1.5, what does it mean? It means discount as a percentage of face value is 1.5%. Okay. So now I need to find the face value. If I minus it by 1, if I say 1 minus this percentage, if I say 1, or you can say 100% minus 1.5%, what does that refer to? That will get me the price divided by face value. Okay. Now I know price divided by face value and I know the price. So it's just by dividing. If 98.5% is equal to 4.9 and 25, 4,925,000, how much is the 100%? Just by dividing, I can get the answer. Okay. I hope you all understood that. Again, I have given you the formula for that here. Just understand why we are doing in this formula method. Okay. And then this question number 4, I want you all to pay attention. Here, they have given you the face value, 182. Sorry, they have given you the days to maturity, 182. And they've also given you the face value, 8 million. Okay. They have given you the yield percentage. They say this investor wants to earn a return of this amount, 4.0928%, this exact amount. And they are asking you what's the price that he's willing to pay. Now this is a simple, now in this, if they word the question as it is, very simple for you. You know the three formulas to find price. You know they have given you the yield, so you will use the third formula. So under the third formula, what do? You have first you will have the yield. You will reverse it first to find the holding period yield, add it to 1, and then the entire answer you will use it to divide the face value. Let's see how it works. So initially what you would, let's go one by one. You will have your return or your yield. I will reverse it. Because it's commercial papers, I will continue to use 365. Okay, so you will first divide it by 365 and then you will multiply it by 182. You're reversing it. Okay, so this will get you like the holding. This is the holding period yield for the 182 days. Okay, and then what do? We will 1 plus this particular amount. Okay, so one meaning it's 100% plus. Okay, so face value, so then I would take the face value, just divide it by this particular answer, I will get the price. All right, now if I change this question in this way, if I say what is the maximum price that the investor is willing to pay. Now, when they use the word maximum, so many students will get confused. Oh my God, what are they asking? It's the same answer, but what you need to understand is they can use that word to actually confuse you. When you see maximum, you will get excited for no reason. But understand the fact that when the yield rate even changes a bit, price will change. You know that. When yield rate increases, price drops. When yield rate decreases, price will increase. That's the relationship, inverse. Okay. So for the investor to earn this particular return, what is the maximum price? That's the price that we have calculated here. If the price increases even by 1 rupee, your yield rate will come down. Remember that. Okay. So this is the maximum price that you will pay for it. Now let's see it here. Here, if I say 4.0927 was the answer if I'm right. 28, sorry. Okay. This is the question. And now I'm asking you what is the maximum price? Again, it's the same answer. Why? Because remember, when the price changes, even by 1 rupee, your yield is going to drop. If it increases by 10,000, your yield will drop. So for you to get this particular yield, this is the maximum price that you will pay. Okay? So now think here. If your yield rate changes, if you're I'm unable to get this working. Oh, I lost this thing. Now imagine this moves to 5%. Okay, you need the yield rate to be 5%. Your price will drop. Okay, but if your yield rate is going to be 3, prices will increase. That's the inverse relationship I'm talking about. So if you need to get this particular return, this is the maximum price that you will pay. Okay, if not, if the price increases by even 1 rupee, your yield will drop. That's the relationship that they can use it to confuse you. Okay, so remember, if they give you a particular yield percentage and say find the maximum price, this is the maximum price. The formula will get you the maximum price that you are willing to pay. Because if the price changes, your return will drop. Or this same question, they can word it in another way. They can say investor wants to earn a minimum return of 4.09. So what is the price? So even if they use the word minimum return, you need to understand at least they need 4.09. If you have a higher price, your return will fall down. So for you to get this at least minimum return, this is the price that you get. Okay, so understand that with minimum and maximum, they can word it in a way to confuse you. All right, and then we move to repurchase agreements. Now under repurchase agreements, this when you are going to get into this topic, what I want you all to understand and keep it in mind is, think of a cashback loan given by your bank. Just have that scenario in your mind when we are going to go through this. Okay, so repurchase agreement is an agreement where one party agrees to sell a security to another with the agreement to buy it back at a future date and a specific price. Okay, so just as the name says, it is the repurchase agreement. You will sell it today, but you agree to repurchase in the future. That's what repurchase refers to. Okay, so now remember, you're selling a security here. You're selling an instrument, and that is going to be your collateral. Okay, that's going to be your fallback. It's like, imagine you're buying and selling a good. If I'm going to sell, I will sell this product, I will sell this bottle to you for 10 rupees, and I will agree to buy it back at the future. So this bottle is like your security. And I will say, I will come back in 3 months' time and I will pay you and get this out. Okay? So repos are collateralized products. Unlike commercial papers, they are not unsecured. They are secured products. Okay? So understand the difference between the money market instruments. Okay? Repurchase agreement, unlike commercial papers, are collateralized products. They are backed by a security. Okay, and in most of the repo transactions, the security that they use is a government security. Mostly it's going to be treasury bills. Okay, they will use government issued securities. Why? Because default risk free, as I told you, so that's more safer. So even investors will prefer government security as a collateral. Okay, now remember, the yield is lesser than an uncollateralized market instrument. Because you have a security here, the return that you will earn from a repurchase is definitely lower than commercial papers. Okay, now commercial papers is comparatively riskier. Why? It's not backed by a security, especially not a treasury bill. Now, treasury bill, you definitely know you will, even if the other party in the repurchase agreement defaults, doesn't come back to purchase it back, you can always sell this security. That assurity is there. Okay. So because of that, the yield, the return from repurchase agreements is usually lesser than the uncollateralized. What I mean is commercial papers. Okay. But it is higher than the government security rate. Okay. It's higher than treasury bill. So if you draw a graph, the return, how the return from an ordering perspective, you will have highest return to a commercial paper. Next, you will have repurchase. Then you will have treasury bills. Okay. And remember, repo also doesn't have a secondary market. So far, what is the only instrument with secondary market? Treasury bill, so far. Okay, so commercial papers doesn't have, even repo doesn't have. Okay, now we'll understand how this repo transaction works. Repo will have two particular instruments, two particular transactions happening. One happening on the day you get into a repo agreement, and the other is on the maturity. Okay, so on the very first day that you invest, you will sell the security that you own to an investor, and you will agree to purchase it back in a future date. Okay, so at that future date, what happens? You will pay back the investor and you will buy the security back. So simply it's this arrangement. Now think you are the borrower. You will sell the government security to the lender with the agreement to buy back at the future date. And then you will get your cash funds. Okay. But at the date of maturity, okay, at the date of maturity, what do? You will say, you will pay back the customer, sorry, pay back the investor. Now cash funds, where you only had, why is it not working? You only have cash funds. Here only cash funds. Here you have to pay back cash funds and a interest. Okay, and a interest. So even by looking at it, you can see that repo, is it a discount instrument? No. Repo is not a discount instrument. It's an add-on instrument. Okay, why? Cash funds, if you borrowed 100, you have to give the same price. If you borrow 100, you will have to return the 100 as it is. There is no discounting involved. But with that 100, now you have to give an interest, maybe an additional 10. Okay, so it's an add-on basis. And then you will pay back and you'll get your government security back. You will get it returned. Okay, that's what I refer to in this. So it has two transactions. One happening at the day of investment, one happening at the day of maturity. Okay, so another one that you have to know is repo. When you're talking from repurchase, you're talking from the angle of the borrower. Okay, just make a note of it. Repurchase is from the borrower angle, from the borrower's perspective. I need money. Okay, I need money. Therefore, I will sell my government security. I will sell my government security with the agreement to buy back, and then I will get funds from the investor. But at the day of maturity, now I have the funds. I will give back the funds to the investor with the interest, and I will get my government security back. So repo talks about it from the borrower's perspective. Okay. Now the same diagram, the very same diagram, when you look from a lender perspective, when you look from the perspective from the lender, you don't call it repurchase. Okay, now think about this. You're looking at it from the lender point of view. Okay, you are the lender. Okay, so you have given me the money. First, as a borrower, I entered into a repurchase agreement where I agreed to sell this security to you, and I agreed that I will repurchase it at a future date. Okay, now you're the lender. What have you done? You have bought the security from me with the agreement to sell it back at a future date. Have you not? Yes. Okay, you understand? Now at a repo transaction, I am the borrower. I have sold you my security. I said Please take the security and give me 1 million. In 1 month's time, I will buy this security from you for a return, for an interest. Okay. Now, what are you doing? You will say, yes, okay, I will buy this security from you and I agree to sell it back in 1 month's time. So, what are you entering into? You are entering into a reverse repo. It's the same transaction, but depending on how you look at it, it's going to be different. Okay, so let's see what the slide says. A reverse repo transaction is an agreement where one party agrees to purchase a security with the agreement to sell it to them at a specific date and a price in future. Therefore, repo and a reverse repo can refer to the same transaction but from different perspectives. Okay? In other words, when one party enters into a repo, the counterparty enters into a reverse repo. Okay? Now here in the repo definition, agreement to sell, it's an agreement where one party sells the security and agrees to buy back in the future. Okay? In the reverse repo, it's again an agreement, but initially you're buying the security with the agreement to sell it back. It's the opposite. Okay, so understand the key terms. If you can, underline this. Repurchase agreement agrees to sell a security with agreement to repurchase. Okay, so you will underline agrees to sell a security with the agreement to repurchase. Underline those two. But a reverse repo agrees to purchase a security with the agreement to resell them. The opposite. Okay? And remember, repo is from the borrower perspective. Okay? But what does reverse repo refer to? Reverse repo is from the lender perspective. Okay? Lender or investor perspective. The one who gives you the money. So that person, what does he do? He will give the money and buy the security. So same transactions. Okay? I haven't changed the diagram. You can see. Oops. Because it is so many students get confused in this topic. It's a bit difficult, I understand. But try your best to. It's the very same diagram, okay? Same diagram, but in the repo transaction, you're going to see from the borrower side. Okay? Borrower sells the security with the agreement to repurchase. Then it's a repurchase agreement. But lender or the investor, you can see the investor is getting the security and giving money. So it's like he's buying it. So he's buying the security with the agreement to sell it back at the future. So at the future, what does he do? He's selling giving away the security and getting money back. So it's like a sale. Same transaction, but different point of view is what I want to stress. Okay. Now, this calculation, repo calculations are a bit different to commercial papers or treasury bills. Why? Because they have this underlining security. Okay, so there is another component. Now, I told you at the beginning itself, when we are studying for repo, think about a cashback loan. If you go to a bank and get a cashback loan against, think about a fixed deposit. So you have a fixed deposit as a collateral. Backing that, you're getting a loan. Will they give you 100% of your FD value? No, definitely not. They will only give you a percentage. They will say, okay, I have your fixed deposit with in the branch, true, but I can't give you 100% of the fixed deposit value as your loan. I will give you 90% of the fixed deposit. Why? Because I need to have a component for variation and the interest. Okay, I need to have a component for the interest as well. So I will say, okay, 90% of the FD value I will give it to you as a loan. Similarly, here also, even though you give government security and borrow the funds, you're not going to get the funds for the exact value of the government security. Okay, you know, treasury bill, it has a secondary market, right? So the price will keep changing. So you can't have the 100% of the price given to you as a cash. Okay, so you will only give, the lender will only give a percentage. Okay, and he will have a buffer. He will say, okay, I will give you 90%, but 10% is my buffer. So this 10%, in repo terms, you call it haircut. Okay, I know the term is a bit funny, but the technical term is haircut. Okay, the amount the investor lends is less than the market value of the security if the security given as collateral. Okay, the difference is called haircut, and it is to ensure that there is sufficient collateral even if the value falls. You know that because there's a secondary market, the value of the security will keep changing. So if the security is around 1 million, it can change the very next day. Because there is a risk as that, you will always have a buffer. You will give a value less than, you will lend a value amount lesser than the market value. Okay, and this difference, meaning this gap, is what we call as the haircut. So if you take the value of the security as 100%, you will only give 90% to the investor. So 10% is your haircut. Even in banks, minimum haircut percentage is around 10%. Okay, so how do you calculate that? You will have the market value of the security. Now remember, market value of the security means the price of the treasury bill or the treasury bond. Now we know how to calculate price of the treasury bill. Okay, that's how they will link questions. So market value, you can put a small asterisk and say price of the treasury bill or bond minus the amount invested in repo, that is the buffer, as a percentage of the market value of the security will get you the haircut as a percentage. Okay, so if you recalculate it, you can get the amount invested. If you reverse this about formula, how do you find amount invested? You will have market value of the security, which is mostly treasury bills, and you multiply it by 1 minus haircut. Okay, so you have 10% haircut, then it will be 90% that you're lending. So 90% of the market value is what the amount that you invested, the amount that was lent as a repo. Okay, market value of the security or treasury bill is the ongoing price of the treasury bill in the market. Okay, which can be calculated in 3 ways as explained in treasury bills. If the primary dealer defaults on the agreement to repurchase, the investor has the claim on the security. Why? It's your collateral. You can always sell that and get your return. Okay. Repo also offers a profitable short-term investment for excess cash. Okay. Now here what I'm talking is from the investor point of view. Ideally, it should be a reverse repo. Okay. So the investor, by using this repo transaction, can earn interest in 2 ways. Okay. One is called the repo rate. They add on interest amount. Investor will receive more when reselling the security at the future date than what was paid initially. Okay. So that is called the repo rate. So the borrower will have to pay the repo rate to the investor. Now here this interest depends on the repo rate. Okay. Now remember, repo rate is the same as reverse repo rate. It's the other way about. Okay. But depends on the stance that you're in. The person that you are on the transaction. Or what you can do is, now remember you have a security here, right? You have a security here now, government security. And you know, price of that will keep fluctuating in the market. So what do? You have a government security, you hold it. Now you have already gotten into the repurchase agreement. Okay. So as an investor, you have that security. You see in the market, price of this security is increasing. So what do? You inform the person, okay? You know, practically what I'm saying is, you will say, fine, I will sell this security, get the capital gain. I can sell it at a higher price and get a gain, and I can always give that to you. I can give that security to you on the day of maturity, but I have the capital gain with me. Okay? So that's what I refer to in the second one. If the investor believes that the price of the security will fall, the investor can sell the security at the current price and later purchase at a higher rate. Sorry, at a lower rate before the repurchase will be settled. So it can be either ways. If the price is increasing, you can do the. If the price is increasing, you can sell it now. You can sell it at a higher price, and then you can replace it with another. Or what you can do is, if the price is going to fall, you will sell at the current price. You know, in the future price is going to fall, so you will sell at the current price. You will sell at the current price, and you will replace it. You will buy it again at a very low price, and you can replace it. Okay. So even through that, you can get like a capital gain. But this practice is very rare. The main motive of getting into that is getting that smaller return. The main more repo rate. Because remember, in a money market, you're not here for the return. You're here for the need, working capital, short-term capital need, or to park the excess fund for a shorter time. That's your motive here. If you want capital gains, heavy capital gains, you will move to a capital market. Okay. So just understand that there are two avenues that you can earn a return from in this transaction. Okay. But from the primary dealer, the benefit of getting into a repo is he can get a loan in a cheapest way possible. Why? Because you're giving a collateral. Unlike commercial papers, you don't have to pay a higher rate. The issuer doesn't have to pay a higher rate. Okay. And he can get the money and always buy new security for future trading. Okay. So it's the cheapest way of getting funding for a primary dealer. Now, there are types of repurchase agreement. You have overnight repurchase, which is you get into a repurchase agreement today and tomorrow morning it will lapse. Okay, so you have to pay it back. If it's this particular diagram, this is day 1, this is day 0, and this is day 1. The very next day maturity will happen. So here the return is very small. Okay. Term repo, that refers to a maturity of more than a day. Here you will have a term that you're talking about. It will be 6 months or 3 months. Sorry. So it will definitely carry a higher rate. Why? Longer the term. Okay. So because of the term is longer, you will get a higher interest out of it. So term is maturity more than 1 day. Ideally, it will be 3 to 6 months. Okay. Open repo is where you don't have a set maturity. The key word here is set. Okay. Key word here is set maturity. You get into the repo and you keep renewing it on a daily basis. Okay. So you might be getting into a 1 day repo, you will read overnight repo, and you will again tomorrow morning renew it. Again, day after that, you renew it. You continuously renew it. It's an open repo where you don't have a set maturity date. Okay. It is renewed each day until one or the other counterparty demands its termination. Okay. And at an interest rate close to the overnight repo rate. Okay, so because it's on a daily basis, so it will be closer to the repo rate that will get transacted. Now remember, when it's a repo, open repo, usually even with regarding to any repo, with the treasury department of your bank, you will sign an agreement called master repurchase agreement. That's the agreement. The document is called master repurchase agreement, MRA. Okay, you have to sign that, and you have to make sure that you will have a ISIN code being allocated to know the security. Okay, practically what I'm talking, so you will get a treasury bill as your collateral, remember? So it's not a physical security. You will have a ISIN number given to you with the amount, face value amount. Okay. Now then we move to the calculations. Repurchase agreement. Now here again, repurchase, very simple. The only way that they can complicate you is if they have haircut involved. Okay, if they have the haircut percentages involved is where they can complicate. If not, it's a simple interest calculation. Okay. Now here you have a 90-day repo transaction. You know the days to maturity. You know the repo rate. Okay. And then now these are the information with regarding to the repo transaction. Okay. And then it says 180-day treasury bill with a discount rate of 5% and a face value of 10 million is given as collateral. Now this information refers to the collateral that they have given you. Okay. Assume the haircut is equal to 10%. So that means the amount that you have given is only 90% of the market value of the treasury bill. Okay. So now the first one is, what is the amount of repo loan? Now, repo is like a loan, you lend, right? So that's what I'm telling you. Repo loan means the amount that you invested in the repo. The loan amount. Okay. The capital amount is what they want. Now how do you find it? You can find it through the haircut calculation method, because you have to first find the market price of the treasury bill and then you know the haircut. Then you can find the amount invested. Okay. Now let's see how it's going to work out. You have the market value of the security. What is the market value of the security? It is the price of the treasury bill. Now you can see repo. Repo, see here, relating to the repo, they have only given you days to maturity and the repo rate, but with regarding to the collateral, they have given you the days to maturity of the treasury bill, the discount rate and the face value, and they've given you the haircut. Now first, what do they want? They need to know how much is invested in the repo, or they want to know the repo loan amount. It's like a loan, right? You have borrowed money to prepay it in the future. So how much is that loan amount? First, you need to find the market price of the collateral. So you know the face value, you know the discount percentage. Just like we studied before, discount rate is annual terms, annualized. So you will have to reverse it. How will you reverse it? Divided by 360 multiplied by the days to maturity. Okay. So then you get the discount in terms of amount. Now here I have initial itself calculated, or what you can do is discount amount is what you need to know. Why do you need discount amount? Because face value minus the discount amount will tell you the price, the ongoing price, right? So what we are going to do is, you have the discount rate, you are going to reverse it. This discount rate is for 1 year. 360. So you will divide it by 360 and you will multiply it by days to maturity for you to know the rate for the maturity period that you hold. This is a percentage. Okay. And then now you need to know the amount. So how do you know the amount? Simply this into the face value will get you the discount in terms of amount. So after you know that, simply minus it from the face value and you will get the market price. Okay. Now after you know get the market price, is the question done? No. This is only the market price of the security. You need to know the amount that you invested. Okay. So what you do is now you move to the next part of it. What do? You use the market price that you got, which is this amount. And now you know the haircut. How much is the haircut? 10. Haircut is, think of it like a buffer. It's a cushion amount. Okay. So 10% of this you will not lend, definitely. Okay. 10% is your buffer. So how much will you lend? You will lend 90%. Simply 1 minus 10% is what you will lend. So how much is the amount that you will lend? Market price into 1 minus haircut will get you the amount invested. So you have invested or you have lent out 8,775,000 in this repo agreement. Okay. So on maturity, next one says amount of repo loan on repayment. Now remember this diagram, it's like a loan. You first found out the loan amount. Now you need to know the loan repayment amount. That means on the maturity, how much are you going to pay back? Now you will have the capital plus the interest. Okay. So again here it's a very simple calculation, simple interest method. You will have capital, you will have the capital amount. You will find the interest on this capital amount. Addition of that is what you will repay. Okay, so this I have given you mathematically. I need you to do a small correction in your slide. I would have mentioned this as 360. It has to be 365. Delete it. Okay, so adjust it. It has to be 365. And then the answer will be 8,877,776. Okay. Why we are using 365 here? Because remember, now we are going to talk about simple interest. Simple interest in a bank, when you calculate, it's 365. In your domain, if you are working with rupees, it's going to be 365. 360 is only used when you work with dollars. You should be knowing that if you are working in your domestic banking unit, normal branches, all the calculations are based on 365. But if your bank will definitely have an offshore banking unit, there, or the dollar-based banking products, there your interest calculation is based on 360. Okay. Now here, because it's in rupee terms, I want you to adjust it to 365. Okay. So there it's simply pretty much straightforward. What do? How do you calculate the repo interest? You have the capital multiplied by the repo rate. Now remember, this will get you the 1 year's interest, but no, how much is your tenor? 90 divided by 365. Okay, so that will get you your answer, interest. So amount at repayment is simply capital plus interest, and that's why you call this instrument an add-on instrument. Okay. So with that, we're done with repo as well. Then we move to certificate of deposits. Now, certificate of deposit, when you again go through this, just like repo, before I started explaining repo, I told you, think of it like a cashback loan. When it comes to certificate of deposit, think of it like a fixed deposit. Okay, you're placing a deposit with the bank at a fixed period. But Unlike a fixed deposit, it's a bearer instrument. You know, even for a fixed deposit, you will get a fixed deposit certificate, right? Okay. Now here, this certificate is a bearer certificate. Anyone who holds the certificate can get the claim on the deposit. Okay. Because of that, what happens is this instrument becomes tradable or negotiable. Okay. So once I invest the money or deposit the money at the bank and get my savings certificate, I can trade it. I can give it to you. I can say, okay, I have a savings certificate, a certificate of deposit. I will give it to you. Can you give me some money? Okay, so it becomes tradable. So now that itself will show you this instrument is a tradable instrument, and that will indicate that it will definitely have a secondary market. Okay, and it's a bearer instrument. Okay, anyone who has the instrument can get the claim for it. So let's see what the slide says. It's a deposit made with the bank for a fixed period of time, and at the end of it you will get paid with interest. Okay, and it is because of this why we put it into the add-on interest bucket. You remember the first slide? Because of the nature of the product, we have inserted it as the add-on interest. So in the primary market at the issuance, it's an add-on instrument. Okay, you will deposit and at the end you will get an interest. It provides a service certificates entitling the bearer the right to receive interest. Okay, certificate of deposit is generally issued by commercial banks and it's negotiable. Because it's a bearer instrument, definitely anyone who has it can get the claim for it, so it's negotiable. It bears a maturity date and a specific interest, and it can be issued in any denomination. Okay, certificate of deposit is similar to a time deposit that restricts the holder from withdrawing funds on demand, and any premature withdrawal will result in penalty. So just like a fixed deposit, but it's tradable. Okay, you can always give it to someone and trade it. So what are the features? It's tradable, and because of that you should know that it has a secondary market. It's not a liquid secondary market, but nevertheless they have a secondary market. The interest offered is lower than a typical fixed deposit. Why? Because you can always trade it. It's a bearer product. Okay, so because of that, the interest that you pay on a certificate of deposit is lesser than a time deposit. As the certificate of deposit is made for a fixed period, depositor can use the funds earlier by selling the certificate to a third party at a price that reflects the period to maturity and the current level of interest. Now this I want you to put an asterisk. It's important. We'll come back. Okay. And the next one is issuing bank. Now remember, it's with the bank that you make the deposit. Usually banks raise deposits for their funding. So if you open a certificate of deposit, it's a low cost borrowing for them. Why? Compared to a fixed deposit, they will have to pay a lesser interest for you. Okay. So for an issuing bank, what's the benefit? The funds are raised at a lower cost. Okay. But to an investor, certificate of deposit gives you a higher interest premium than government securities. Why? Because it is less liquid and it has a relatively higher risk than the treasury bills or bonds. Okay, now here you talk about treasury bills. So compared to treasury bills, you will get a higher interest to certificate of deposit. Okay. Now here, remember I told you to put an asterisk. You can recall, initially when you make the deposit, you make it at an add-on basis. True. But when you move to the secondary market, how will you trade? You will have a certificate which will say maybe 1 million. Okay, that deposit is worth 1 million. It will have an interest at maturity. But when you trade it in the secondary market, you will trade it at a discount. Okay, you will trade it at a discount. So this product has both add-on and discount. But remember, add-on is at the issuance when you make the deposit. the product bears a add-on interest. Only in the secondary market, a discounting is involved. Okay. And then we will move on to the calculations. Again, here I want you to make a small amendment. Strike this word off and include which. The words that you should mention is which includes. Okay. So let's do two calculations. One is an investor purchased a negotiable certificate of deposit a year ago. So again, you can say year ago, meaning the maturity is 365 here. In a secondary market, it is redeemed today upon maturity and receives rupees 1 million, which includes, that's the amendment I want you to make, which includes rupees 40,000 as interest. So all inclusive, he has got 1 million. And you need to know the yield of it. How much is the yield? Now, last class, remember I told you, yield is return divided by the investment. Now, here you don't have any other information. You have got 1 million and you've got 40 as interest, which is included in that 1 million. Okay. So how will you find your yield? Your return is 40,000 as the interest. You assume that the price that you bought it is 1 million minus the 40,000. Okay, so it's 960,000, and then you will annualize. When you annualize, remember 3 multiplied by 365 because it's yield, and you will divide it by, again, a year ago you will use 364. So your yield for this answer is, for this question is 4.167. Here, this is another question. Okay. So here your answer is 4.16. All right. Now similarly, we will have another question. It's a 3-month certificate of deposit. Initially, okay. Initially, it's a 3-month certificate of deposit for 100,000 at 6%. Okay. Matures in 73 days. Okay. It is currently trading at 99. Okay. Currently trading at 99. What is the rate of interest? Now here, even though they have given you 6%, you are unable to use it. You don't need this information. It's just another one to confuse you per se. But here what you will do is the essential component is only the highlighted information. Okay. Not even the 3-month one. So here your information that you need to do the question is 100,000, 73 days, and then the fact that it has a price. Okay. So what is your return? You bought it at 99. Now this is currently trading at 99,000. So if you buy it today, what is your return? 1,000. What is the price that you bought? 99. And you will annualize it. Multiplied by 365 divided by days to maturity. If you buy it today, in 73 days. Okay. So there you will get 5.09% as the answer. Now in these two questions, it is a simpler question. Okay. You will have a very basic, you don't have too much of information. There is no capital gains involved. Okay. You have bought it at a price, which you also have the return involved. So it's a very basic way of calculating. But there can be another way. They have not tested it yet, but there are possibilities where you will have a capital gain also involved in it. So let's see how that works out. So we'll use the first question in the natural form with another information. Okay, so let's see this question. The very same question number 1. But you will also have this additional information which says you can buy it in the secondary market at 970,000. Okay. 1 year ago, you bought it at 970,000 and on maturity, you receive 1 million and you receive 40,000. Okay. So what is the gross amount that you receive at maturity? 1,040. Sorry, 1,040,000. And what is the amount that you invest? 970. Okay. Now remember I told you yield is a very simple calculation. How do you find yield? You will have you will have a return divided by the investment. Simple as that. That will get you your yield calculation. Now this being annualized. Okay. So here what is your return? On maturity you get 1,040 and you have invested 970. So your return here is simply maturity amount minus the investment. Okay, that's 70,000. So or you can say it's 40,000 interest plus the 30,000 capital gain that you will get. Okay. And what is the investment amount? 970. So simply 70 divided by 970. Again, don't forget, you have to annualize 3 into 365. Again, this is bought a year ago. Again, 365. You will get your yield. Okay, so again, it's a smaller variation to your first question. Just make a note to it make it like question number 3. Okay, what is the variation? Same question number 1, but you have additional information which says you bought it at a secondary market for 970,000. Okay, and you will have 1 million plus another 40,000 as on your maturity. Okay, so depending on that, how you get your annualized yield. Okay, so with that, we'll wind up today's lecture. Next week, we'll go through after that, you don't have much calculations. It's pretty much theory, just a few slides. Okay, so we can cover that off very pretty easily. And then we'll move on to capital markets and introduction. And then I'm pretty sure you can move on to bonds next week. So with that, we can move to the bond calculation, bond market next week. So we'll finish that off next week. All right. So again, this week, tomorrow, I will send out the weekly for the weekly questions. Ones who didn't send me the email before, ones who didn't send me the email addresses before, please send it. Ones who already have, please send. Roshan, it's better if you could drop me an email because I'm unable to copy paste it from here. Okay, so drop me an email to this email address I have mentioned in the chat. I'll try my best to copy it whether it's possible. No, debentures cannot be used as a collateral. No, because it's short term and this is long term. Usually you use a government security because debenture can have a, what do I say? It will definitely have your a credit risk, right? It's issued by a company. Why do you use a government security? Because it's default risk free. So, and it's assured. You don't have to bother about it. You don't have to worry about it. Definitely it's liquid in the secondary market. So debentures you don't use for repo. You use government securities. There are instances where they use treasury bonds, but mostly it's treasury bills because it's short term. Unless you go for a term repo or an open repo, you will get a treasury bond. But if it's overnight, definitely it's a treasury bill that's allocated. I hope that answers Asita's question. So if you didn't give me the email addresses, drop me an email to this email address. If you already have, I will send out the questions tomorrow. Ones who were sharing it with me today, I will send you all 3 weeks. Last week, whatever I sent, if you haven't answered, please send it by this week because from next week onwards, I will be only answering, I'll be only checking the answers for that week's questions. I want to regularize it. Okay. And we'll work it out and try somehow improve your writing from the weekly test banks. Okay. So with that, we'll wind up for today. Thank you all for listening. We'll come back next week. Okay. Thank you.